We are at Circa. It's BetBash IV in the ambassador room, and the man to my left doesn't need an introduction, but I put some words together. An innovator, a storyteller, a calculator, an odds maker, a fashionista, a friend, and probably the best dressed guest in the history of Chicken Dinner. Let's put our hands together for the one and only Roxy Roxborough, everybody. Did you like that?
Yeah, it's more than I deserve, and certainly more than I'm used to. So, yeah.
I think intros can be sort of BS sometimes.
Yeah.
Let's just get to the point.
Oh, let's get at it.
And that's what we do. Everybody's story to me has a beginning, obviously. And I've kind of stalked you on the internet for 2 weeks to dig up questions and put together ideas. But I think the one part of your life that isn't chronicled enough is the time that you spent in Vancouver when you were, I believe, booking bets out of a pool hall, correct?
Pool hall and a mining stockbroker's office.
How did that come about?
Well, I was in Vancouver, and I thought it was, first of all, there's no gambling outside of Nevada. Outside of racetracks, there's no gambling anywhere. There's not even lotteries in the late 60s. So gamblers are at the racetrack, and when they're not at the racetrack, they're at the pool halls. And pool halls were used to settle up. There's, of course, snooker and nine-ball are great gambling games, but you learn a lot at pool halls. You meet other bookmakers. That's where you pay, you settle up. And people are just about betting on everything. And I was 18 or 19 at the time, 18, I think. And it was a good opportunity for me to learn the business. A little costly at first because everybody takes advantage of the new kid or the mark. But about that time, I was a pretty good snooker player, like at the Masons Lodge, but when I saw them playing for money, it didn't take me long to figure out that I don't want to be Paul Newman, I want to be George C. Scott. I want to manage other people's money. I don't want to bet on myself. And then I started backing some people. And, you know, you need sometimes to borrow money. And I remember that this is one of the first lessons I ever learned in gambling, and that is you have to stay in action. It doesn't make any difference how good a bet looks. If it's going to put you broke, you just can't take it all. And when I mean broke, I don't mean you're out of money. I don't mean you're out of money and you can't borrow. I mean you have no way to earn to come back and do something for somebody that can help you make money. And that's the number one fear.
Did it ever get to that point? Or close to it, up against it?
A couple of times. No, a couple of times, because this is a different generation. I think we all learn from being broke. And eventually the distaste gets so bad. Your lifestyle disappears and everything. And when I came to Las Vegas, I vowed I'd never go broke again. And, it's easier said than done.
I was going to say, you really went for it, huh? You go from Vancouver to Vegas, of all places.
Well, I got a push. I was booking out of this NFL football, out of this stockbroker's office that was on the Vancouver Stock Exchange, which is, at that time, was practically all mining stocks, which is practically all a gambling game. And insider information gambling game. So I was booking Friday nights for 1 hour, NFL, from 4 to 5. The money was guaranteed. I knew which way they were going to bet, and I had 30 hours to move it. It's pretty hard to lose in that spot. And like a lot of times, your first interaction with the police isn't because you're the target. You get caught in a crossfire. So they were investigating a guy for mining stock fraud. Real genius. He writes down how everybody he screwed, and then he puts down my name and all the bets he made and the phone number.
And your address and your social security number and what you're allergic to.
So the police come over, and they were satisfied that I wasn't in on the mining stock fraud. That's all they cared about. And they said, we're putting you on notice. About a year later, disgruntled bettor called the police and told them I was booking. And same vice detective came over, and he says, I thought I'd put you on notice. I said, did you? He says, yeah, I did. I said, well, what should I do? I said, get out. I said, well, how about at the end of the season, I moved to Las Vegas. There's only 3 weeks left. He says, quicker. I said, well, can I at least settle up on Tuesday? He says, yes, and you better be gone on Wednesday. Well, that's what I did. And I moved to Las Vegas, and I'd been to Las Vegas many times before that, but I moved permanently here the day after Christmas, 1975.
And over time, you become the preeminent odds man. I mean, that's how I would describe it. You were the odds guy in the 80s and 90s.
It's not a job I wanted. It's one that Chris Andrews, sitting in the first row, dragged me into. I really wanted to be a bettor.
That's Jimmy Vaccaro's phone, by the way, ringing, if anybody's wondering.
Yeah.
It's my brother. Sonny Michael's on the...
Yeah. Cut him off. So,
Sonny Vaccaro joining Chicken Dinner remotely.
I think I was betting sports and booking. One thing that's never covered in my life is I've been a bookmaker he doesn't even know how to turn it off.
No.
I'm telling you, he doesn't.
Sonny better have the next Michael Jordan, right?
I booked 3 times in my life, twice as a street bookmaker, which is a euphemism for a legal bookmaker, and once with a license. And every time it was my own money. And that gives you a little different perspective on how the game works. After I'd come to Las Vegas, I'd been betting, and I'd been booking with a character named Tom Jajoris. And then I developed this very good edge in baseball. But like a lot of things, nothing lasts forever. So when you're used to getting an ROI of 20%, and then it goes to 15, and then it goes to 10, and then it gets really hard to scale up your bets, and your ROI is about 3 or 4. I know people would climb over a wall to get 3 or 4% these days.
Especially DraftKings.
But what happens is we always didn't get paid in every spot, so you needed to have a high ROI. We used to bet with anybody. I don't care how bad the numbers were. Guy taking a newspaper odds out of Albuquerque, we'd find a way to get into them. A guy down South Carolina, we got into him. Eventually, you know that the edge that we had at one time was so strong, we know eventually you're not going to get paid. You hope you can bleed them out, You're not trying to bleed them out. You're trying to take the money today and worry about the heat tomorrow. But it doesn't always work that way. So the edge was, I didn't see my life improving much. I'm where I am. Yeah, I got a nice place to stay. I got a new car every 2 years. I got nice clothes, but I wanted a little higher lifestyle. And I was up on a busman's holiday in Reno one summer. I mean, what kind of a sick guy that lives in Las Vegas 365 days a year, and he takes a vacation, he goes to Reno. And on top of that, I'm hanging out at the Club Calneva, which is one of the biggest dives in the state. You'd say that, wouldn't you, Chris? And you worked there.
The joke was, if you wanted to hide your bankroll, you put it under the bar of soap at the Calneva.
So I was up there, and I'd had pretty good week with him betting baseball totals, and he asked me that he'd heard of me, and he wanted to know if I'd help him with the totals when I went back to Las Vegas, what they ought to be. I said, okay, and we agreed on a paycheck. At that time, that wasn't cutting into what I was doing because Las Vegas and Reno they could have been in separate countries. There's no communications. It's payphone to payphone, essentially, right? And I did that, and then he hooked me up. I started making other lines for him, and he hooked me up with other books up north, and all of a sudden I had a business with 7 or 8 books up north selling them odds, and I decided to incorporate and came up with Las Vegas Sports Consultants, Inc. And then Scotty Scheller comes and asks me if I want to do the Stardust odds, and then it was a totally different thing for my life, because I knew I'd have to give up betting if I was making odds for somebody that not only originating the odds, but were in Las Vegas. And I said yes, and I thought, we'll see where it goes for a year or two. And then it turned out to be a real big business, which really surprised me. Of course, when I said yes to Scotty, I didn't get another day off for about 17 years. But I just didn't see the business getting that big. Every casino did not have to have a racing sports book, and some were adamant that they wouldn't. So it was a pretty limited market.
You brought up the word edge. I love that word. It's one of my favorite words. I love edge. I hate the word value because value is fucking stupid. People say they have value and the team loses by 3 touchdowns. It's my favorite word. Nobody knows how to define value. But edge is a word I think we can define. How much bigger is your edge 30 years ago? No Twitter, no immediate reports. I mean, you could really find some stuff that these guys would have no idea was going on, right?
Yes, you could.
And get down.
But yeah, but basically you're getting down in Nevada, you're getting down in Las Vegas, you're really not getting down at all. I mean, if you tied yourself into some other books, sometimes you got paid and sometimes you didn't. Yes, the edges were large, but the opportunities might be better today. Because,
Why?
well, the betting menu is so much larger. Gee, I mean, we didn't, when I first came to town, if somebody was over a 20-point favorite in college football, they scratched the game. And basketball started on January 2nd. Didn't make any difference they were playing for 2 months. It just started on January 2nd. The propositions were unknown until Jimmy Vaccaro over here started offering. He started offering the first over and under ever in sports betting history when he was at the Mirage. I'm not sure who started the first props. That's hard to say. But when Kirk Brooks,
4 guys claim it, right?
well, it could be. But Kirk Brooks probably did the most to push it forward for Super Bowl, and then Jake Cornegay, and now and they used to put them up on Thursday or Friday, and now if people don't have props on Monday afternoon when the 2 teams are deciding the Super Bowl, they can't see 250 props who are up in arms. So the opportunities now are higher, but the edge isn't as high, but the opportunities are higher.
You brought up Jimmy. Jimmy has rejoined us from his cell phone call.
Okay.
If somebody were to be dropped on this planet and ask you about Jimmy Book and the Tyson fight, Tyson fight, how would you tell that story?
Well, actually, there wasn't that much interest in it among gamblers because they knew that it couldn't be a realistic price on it. And Jimmy's the only one to put it up. I got a really good story from this, too, because there used to be a real character who used to hang out in the book, Jimmy Aller. He used to bet lots of stuff there. And he bet, I believe it was, he got 41 to 1. I think you gave him 41 to 1 because he was a good customer or something like that. He laid 82,000 to win 2,000.
Oh.
And then Walt was there when I got the ticket after the fight, another front row celeb here we have today. I got that, he gave me that ticket a few days later, and it was on one of these United Tote tickets where the ink started fading really fast. And I kept it alive for 3 or 4 years you can do this with a lot of tickets. You can iron them, and it brings the ink up. And eventually it gave up the ghost, but that was probably the best sports betting souvenir I've ever had.
42 to 1, right, Jimmy? Closed?
Yeah.
Closed at 42 to 1. Opened it with Jimmy Aller at 27 to 1. He bet 54,000 to 2,000.
Yeah.
I made it 31 to 1. He bet 62,000 or whatever. Then he laid 37 to 1 also. But quickly, I don't want to take up Roxy's time, but this is you'll like this one. It's about a half hour before game time, and it was in Japan, so there was no TV. We just kept getting updates because it was whatever, we couldn't get it. And the guy came up, he was a casino guy, but he came up with a casino host. He bet $420,000, something like that, to win 10,000. I said, you bet that? Why'd you bet that? He said, well, I'm going to win 10,000. That was his thought process.
Wow. Yeah. I know the game was late, and I was on a red-eye flight to Miami to go to Gulfstream Park for the weekend, and I didn't think anything of it. And then I saw like the headlines in the newspaper, and the result was unfathomable, really. And then when you go back and look at the fight, he just beat him up. Douglas just beat him up. I also got involved in a lawsuit with
Oh,
that.
this is good.
Well, I
It took 17 minutes to get to our first lawsuit.
This was actually, I testified in federal court for
I'm wearing a wire, don't worry.
Nah.
It's in here.
Stan Hunterton, who represented the Win. And Stan had investigated me, tapped my phone earlier in my days in Las Vegas, and later he called me to be a witness for him. And the suit was the Win against against Don King. And basically, the bottom line was, Steve Wynn did not like the contract when Buster Douglas won because he had to take the next two fights, I think. Now, everybody ended up suing Don King whether it was right or not. So he was pretty used to it, and I just testified to what the odds of the fight were and what were the chances. How could I relate that to other sporting events, and that was it. But that fight, I have some history with that. Yeah.
I do want to open this up, like I said, maybe 15 minutes and let the people in the
Okay,
audience
sure.
here ask some questions. And we could tell stories for hours. But I do think there's an education angle that I wanted to get to. And I think it's a very easy question, but the answers are always very different. How do I get better at sports betting? How would you answer that question?
Okay. Well, first of all, let me give you some history that in about 1968 in the Reno airport, I was going home broke again. And I picked up this book, Beat the Dealer by Ed Thorpe. By that time, it had already been out 8 years. It was a seminal book, of course. I was the only one who ever read it. They couldn't make any money playing blackjack. But I was able to break even. I thought that was unbelievable. But it did. I kept rereading it, and by the 70s, early 70s, started to click into me. My approach to sports betting was wrong. It wasn't to see as many games as you could. It wasn't to read as many newspaper stories as you could. It was to take a mathematical look at it. As my horse betting partner, Maury Wolf, said, I'd rather make a good bet than have a good opinion. And that served me well. And then Ed would come into my life later, in the 90s when I was running my family's money and then eventually my own, and his takes on the stock market were really beneficial too. So what could you do to make yourself a better sports bettor? Well, if you're not in it, you need to invest about $7 and watch this video called The Best of It. It follows gamblers around for 5 years. And I'm not going to ruin it for you, but if you watch that 90 minutes and you still want to be a professional gambler, okay. It's Apple TV, yeah. I think it's available. Yeah, Apple TV, right? And so, let's say you've already decided that that doesn't bother you. Well, the two best things you can do to be a better sports bettor is read Ed Miller's book, The Logic of Sports Betting. It's for everybody. It's for beginners, it's for intermediate, it's for experts. It's a process of what I said earlier, how to make a good bet. And then you could get a trial subscription to Unabated Sports. And then you could look at how they rate proposition bets and how much a half a point means. And I'm pretty sure I could get anybody down to losing less than 1% in sports. Now, that's not your goal to lose less than 1%, of course. But for 95% of the population, it would be a big improvement. So how do you go from the minus 1% up to plus 2 or 3%? That's what everybody wants to know. Well, here's all I can tell you. I got you to minus 1% without you even have to know one thing about sports. You don't have to know one player, one team, anything. So it's up to you to apply your knowledge with what you've already learned to get into the plus column. And there are opportunities here. Yes, the markets are much more efficient now than they used to be, but there's an incredible amount of betting opportunities. And before I make a bet, here's two things I always thought about. One was, I used to ask myself, why should I not make this bet? Usually when people like a bet, they want positive reinforcement about they're making the right bet. and they just keep reading the data that supports making that bet. But you should be asking yourself why I shouldn't make that bet. And then the other things that people refuse to consider as alternative outcomes, especially in futures, sometimes, here's a simplistic plan. You think two teams are going to win the AL East, and you discount the other teams, which you can't because there's a price on all of them. And people that bet football props, they always find out that if a score is low scoring, they might have done good or very bad. So, and it's high scoring the opposite. There's a lot of bets that are correlated within your own portfolio that you don't understand. So you really need to look at alternative outcomes.
That was outstanding. I can't wait to go back and cut that up, and we're going to distribute this on YouTube and all that jazz. I mean, the man is, I mean, you could ask him basically anything. I love your point about, you didn't say this in so many words, but you bet numbers, not teams. I saw somebody walking around with a shirt that says he bets teams, not numbers, and
George, he's become a legend, cult legend.
So let's also talk about the first time I met Spanky, and thanks to Spanky, of course, for giving us this opportunity to do this show together.
Uh-huh.
First time I met Spanky, he says, I couldn't name 5 players in college football right now.
Uh-huh.
I said, why? That can't be true. And he said, why do I care about the players? All I care about is the number.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this comes, first of all, if you go on radio or television and you're picking games, you better have a narrative. You can't be pulling out a piece of paper like this and saying, well, I have this team 98.73, and I subtract this team, and it makes it 14.21. I mean, that's actually the way people bet. But you can't go on radio and TV and do that because there's no story in it. The story is in the way you make the numbers. So a good analogy would be when I started living in Thailand half the year, English football is the end-all and be-all. In fact, in Asia, that's it. Everybody follows the English Premier League, and the starting times were good for me. I watched every game. I started taping them. Actually, in Thailand, we could get every game, and in England, they could only get 3. They just sell every one of their games around the world, and they black themselves out. It's insanity. So, and I would tape all the games, and I watched each game 2 or 3 times, and I was rating each individual player, like your father and grandfather, Alex, do, right? Right. Every player, I did that. And replacements in the transfer season, I had to have a rating on all the players that came in and out. And that served me well for a while. But basically, I found out data was better. I was one of the earlier guys to get into expected goals. And I started doing better with data, and I totally stopped watching the games. I've got somebody to watch the games because if somebody gets hurt, you have to know. But the nice thing is they don't play back to back. I mean, you probably have a week or at least 3 days to evaluate what happened. And so now, I don't even watch English soccer anymore, but I love going over the game recaps and the data and seeing the way the game should have been played in my mind, not the way it was played. And so that's, now expected goals is a process that would revolutionize soccer betting, also soccer analytics about what players assign. It's once everybody knows about it, it's not any good anymore. It's like when the target becomes the standard isn't any good anymore. I'm working on something else, what I can't say, but I've actually regressed back to an older idea that's actually working now. So,
You brought up Alex White, for those that aren't here in Vegas, rising star in the space. Her father, Kenny, her grandfather, I mean, just third-generation handicapper. Kenny said, working against you in the 80s for numbers and scoops was like fighting a freight train with a machine gun. I think that's a compliment. I think that's a pretty good way to put it, how you dominated the space.
I think it is.
I want to wrap this up with the news that DraftKings is going to start in the bigger states. And the backstory, a lot of people don't know. I'm from Illinois. Illinois was getting 15% tax. The operators are paying 15% in that state. The governor, who just gobbles up money, decided that we're going to now tax the big fish 40%. So DraftKings is now going to pay 25% hike on operations. So they had to figure something out, and they decided that they're going to now create a tax on wins, 3.2%. Somebody says to me, well, it's even money goes to minus 104. That's not a big deal. I said, wrong. I said, number two, that means minus 110 goes to minus 114. And good luck beating that over a football season.
Well, yeah, there's 4 states that DraftKings said they were going to implement it in, and those are the 4 highly taxed states, which are
Illinois,
yeah, New York 51%,
Pennsylvania, Vermont.
yeah, Pennsylvania 36, Vermont 31. I don't think, I mean, Vermont's like a drop in the ocean in sports betting, but so their goal is to get to paying an effective 20% tax on the back of the players. So, could they have done this a better way? Of course they could have. Essentially, they can do whatever they want. It doesn't mean the market will follow. But I think it shows that the company's a little bit unaware or brain dead to its customers. They could have raised this money without charging you off your winnings. I mean, the player's effective rate will be a lot less because you only pay it when you win. But the point is that there's other ways to do it. They could, the 110 probably is dragging down sports books in high tax states, minus 110, and they could have gone to 115. Or they could have taken money out of same game parlays, which nobody really has a hard time evaluating what the take actually is. We know it's real high because we get to see the results. And then, of course, there's a question of, are players price sensitive or not? So this is sort of painful, but in 1991, I worked on a committee called the 1995 Committee to see where racing should be in 1995, horse racing. We had some good ideas, but the one that would never come to grasp was, and this has been, economists have been looking at this for years, smart people, what's the best effective takeout rate for horse racing? And basically what's happened is that the only people that most players aren't sensitive to it. And a lot of tracks decided in the middle 90s just to raise the take 1% on everything. And they didn't see their handle go down. But comparables are hard to do. So who's price sensitive in sports betting? Probably about 5% of the people, and half of those are here this week. So I'm not sure the players are price sensitive. It's funny how you drive by a gas station every day and you know exactly what the price is, whether you need gas or not. It's the only thing I can think of where they actually put the price on the outside of the building, right? And everybody knows what it is, and if it goes up 5 cents, everybody says, I can't believe the price of gas. Nobody knows what the takeout is on some of these bets they make on these parlays. So I'm not so sure the industry is that price sensitive. But the third thing I want to say, and this is the bad news, the potential bad news, if they can do it, and after a year they don't see any appreciable difference in their handle, and they might not because it's still a growing business. You can make a lot of mistakes in a growing business, and business still goes up. Other people will follow it.
That was sort of the last thing I wanted to ask. And Mitch and Paul, the hosts of Follow the Money on VSiN, both wanted me to ask you, is this, you don't want to use terms like doomsday, but this is a domino that is certainly falling in the wrong direction. And I guess the question is, how many other dominoes does this surcharge knock down? I don't think we have the answer, but the possibility of every book charging you 3, 4, 5% on a win is terrifying.
Well, yes, it is. Now, Mexico tried this, and it sort of decimated their business. And Caliente Sports, once they got a casino license, they started having slot machines. They really didn't care about sports, and they just put a surcharge on the winning bets because they didn't care. Of course, you never knew what it was. It changed almost every week. And you didn't know what it was until you got your ticket back, and then you figured it. Sometimes it was 3%, sometimes it was 7%. It's still that way, right? Okay. Thanks, Walt. But so basically, what you've got here is if they eventually do move on to casinos, I think it's going to be harder than most people think, iCasinos. But if they do, then sports betting just becomes another, like for Caliente, they don't care. They got slot machines, they don't care. I think it's almost certain that every state that has a low tax state will go revisit it. I mean, if your tax rate is under 10%, and you see some states have 40 or 50, you don't care about surcharges. You're just thinking of all the money that your state's left on the table. So it's almost a certainty that tax rates are going to go up. And actually, they've been, Nevada, about the same, 6.75%. They probably should be higher, actually. But of course, when you're a one industry state, you get a lot of clout. But realistically, they should be higher.
Let's hear it for Roxy Roxborough, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So that will do it for our one-on-one. We don't have crowd mics, so we may need to cuppage if anybody wants to ask a question. But show of hands, anybody have a question for Roxy? Don't be scared.
We can
Patrick
repeat the
Everson.
question, okay?
Patrick Everson's going to lead us off.
Yeah.
Roxy is sort of tied into the whole DK thing, but what do you think the chances are that DK or FanDuel gets a brick and mortar relationship here and tries to get into the Nevada market? Do you think that's something? I would assume that's something they're ambitious to do. What do you think their likelihood is of doing it?
Well, I can think of the reason not to do it. They're doing fine without it. They're going to have to go under incredible scrutiny with the Gaming Control Board. It's amazing that DraftKings can have their office here and not take a bet here. That's something that used to be a violation of federal law. I know all that's changed. It's changed for the better, but that's sort of a mind-boggling thing. And so now Nevada's about to drop out of the top 10 in states handle, which is happening faster than I thought. And that's without California, Texas, and nobody knows what's going on in Florida. And I just assume Florida's got to be larger, even with one operator. So it's going to be more like a market for a state relative to its population than to the outside proportion that it's always been. Las Vegas is the best at throwing big events, and you'll see when there's a big event like a Super Bowl or the Final Four, our per capita bet amount goes way, way up because we're good at big events. And that's because we do have brick and mortar operations. I don't know if there's that much future in it.
I have a buddy who works in the Florida space, and he said the Seminoles are doing just okay, by the way.
Yeah,
they're
I'm sure they are.
very happy with their take. Matt.
First off, Roxy, thank you for being here.
Okay, you're welcome.
When it comes to the education that you guys touched on, it's often said that American bettors don't have an appetite for education, and I'm wondering what you think about how true that is and how we collectively can possibly flip it back on ourselves and consider what we can do better to educate in a more approachable way.
Yeah, this is sort of interesting because when you're a professional bettor, you're happy if the public doesn't know anything. But if you want a long-term interest in the game, it's better that people don't blow off their money so fast. It's just like you can chop somebody up on a slot machine in an hour, and their whole weekend's gone. Or you can bleed them out and let them pretend they had a good time. So I think that's what, sports betting, it would be better if we could educate players. There's no question about it. It's not for sure that everybody needs to get educated, though. Because this is, for most people, it's entertainment. Like, there's people who go to movies and they read 5 or 6 movie reviews before they go, because they don't want to waste their money. Most people they like Transformers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever, and they go out to see Transformers 6, right? And there's a lot of people, like you and me, we like to know about the beer we drink. I like to know about the bourbon I drink. But most people just come in and sip scotch and soda. So, yes, there's education possibilities. And how you bring it to the people, the best way to bring it is through the betting companies, through their apps. People just don't read it. Look, for Pinnacle for years, to me, ran the absolute smartest stories I'd ever seen they were blogs that ran for years. and it was how to be a much better bettor, and they were terrific. I don't know how many people read them, but they're all archived. They're terrific.
I think a lot of people just do this for fun, unfortunately. But our mutual friend, I call him Vegas Rick, you know Ricky, he said, this hasn't been fun in 25 years for me. Because he does it every day. He's like, for me, this isn't fun. This is survival. So, and now, most people aren't betting for a living, but that's how wide-ranging the character that bets on games can be. You know,
Sure.
from the $5 parlay guy to the guy who's got $1 million in the air on a Saturday.
Yeah.
JD.
Once again, Roxy, thank you for doing this. This has been incredible so far.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about things happening in the space that are discouraging and we don't like. Has
Yeah.
there been anything since regulation kind of became nationalized that you do like and you think are encouraging?
Okay, I didn't recognize you without your cowboy hat, so really. Well, I think there's been some better rules and regulations. Boy, it took Nevada forever and they finally did, and I think it was the encouragement of other states that all the tickets, sports betting tickets, are good for 1 year from the date that the event ended. I think that's a real positive because everybody used to have different expiration dates. Wherever Chris has worked, they paid wherever. With my partner, Vic Salerno, tickets at Leroy's were good forever. Sure, they dropped the revenue after a year or after 30 days, but you brought in a ticket, they could read it, they paid it. But I think there are some regulations that have been good. Well, first of all, there's so many opportunities to bet everyday games that we never thought about. I think that's been good for players. You know, some of the things we started in Nevada, we had a monopoly on technology and odds making for a lot of years, right? And there's not much interest in innovating when you're a monopoly. And we got left in the dust when people came in with technology that could write a lot more bets. And we used to be married to this idea before phone apps that if you didn't have the board space, you really you weren't going to write much business on it except from wise guys. So I think the betting menu is a lot better. And the future bets now are much better for the players, and they're updated all the time. So there are a lot of positive aspects for players, I think. There actually is now some gaming control boards around the country that are listening to players and are holding people responsible for accepting bets and wanting to void them. I think that's a positive too.
I did talk to a gentleman yesterday who was steaming that Circa wasn't offering Little League lines, and I said, buddy, do you think Nevada Gaming is going to regulate Little League lines? You can't please everybody, Rox.
No, you can't, but I think Leroy's once put a final up, and you know, you always have where you going to draw the line. So I always use that one thing, like if there's election betting, where are you going to draw the line? Is it just going to be for president? Is it going to be for federal elections? You know, is it going to be for Nye County sheriff? You basically, there has to be guidelines for everything. Now nobody would put up Little League Baseball because of backlash, but offshores put up a lot of ridiculous things. And so does Polymarket, which is sort of more of a fun type of exchange betting on weird things. I don't like the idea that you can bet on things that have already happened, like Academy Awards. Nobody takes any money on them, but I've never liked the idea that you shouldn't be able to bet MVP after the voting stopped. You know, I like the idea that the bets were decided on the field of play. And the coin toss wouldn't fit into me. I think it's harmless, but I mean, that's not decided on the field of play, really. So,
I can see Kenny White in the back calculating the line on Hawaii and California Little League. I think he's
hiding.
He'll have that for us in like 32 seconds,
Yeah.
the line on the 12-year-olds. I'm going to steal a question real quick because you brought up election betting. Robert Walker was on this show years ago, and he said that if you could bet on the presidential election, it would be the biggest thing ever. Super Bowl does what, 150 million in Nevada on a good year? I mean, the day of the election in itself could be $150 million, but you're taking bets for 4 years, right? President wins the election, then you got 4 years till the next result.
Yeah, that helps your hold percentage, but you have to put aside bonds for those outstanding futures. The idea that books get to sit on all this money that's outstanding is not true. Well, election betting was pretty simple until the last election. And then everybody kept changing the rules after the election. And there's better rules now. Some people were going to pay on who was inaugurated, on January 20th. Some people said after the Electoral College vote. Some people said after ABC News declared a winner or UPI declared a winner. And then the election was taken into courts, and we had electors that were going to change their votes and everything. And all the big places around the world sort of panicked that everybody would, if the election got overturned, everybody would want their money. This cycle around, there's at least double the amount of rules on how they pay. There's been squabbles like just to give you an example, the two independents in the Senate that always vote with the Democrats, one English bookmaker didn't count them. It's Democrats. So when they're doing who was control of the Senate or how many seats the Democrats would get, they excluded these two guys. Everybody else put them in. So this reminds you of boxing, the early days of boxing. There's an incredible amount of rules that have to go through, and basically the only way you go through them is live and learn. Now, do I think it's a good idea? I bet elections, but I bet them for different reasons. I always bet on the party that says they're going to raise my taxes, because if I want to get, it's a prepayment. So I'm up in the air about election betting in sports books.
You're right about the wavering rules. It's funny, though, even when the rules are concrete, like a 55-minute football rule, people are still upset.
Good.
How are you not going to pay me? It was over. It's literally in the house rules.
Yeah, but there's a reason. It's fair, too. Actually, this is going to be more than you want to know. But in 1976, for a lot of you young people, you wouldn't believe this, but the college all-stars played the Super Bowl champion or the NFL champion the year before in the exhibition game in Chicago. It was the first exhibition game of the season. And the NFL was so bad in the 30s and 40s, they lost a lot of these games. But the last one they ever held, and this is one of the last reasons they held it, in 1976, the score, let me see, the Steelers were winning 24-0. There were 3 minutes left in the third quarter. Big thunderstorm opened up. They were going to wait till the thunderstorm went away, restart the game, but all the fans poured into the crowd. These are Chicago people. I love them.
Careful. This is a Chicago podcast.
These are probably Southside Chicago people to boot. And
Probably White Sox fans.
They all ran onto the field, and they started sliding in the mud and all this stuff, and the field became unplayable. This is Soldiers Field. And sportsbooks didn't have rules for it. Now, the spread had been covered. I think it was 18. So the spread had already been covered. And people wanted to get paid, and people had to make rules up. It's hard to believe. And some people decided that the rule would be the third quarter. Some people decided 55 minutes. It took 2 or 3 events like this over the next few years to get most people to decide it was 55 minutes. Now, why is 55 minutes fair? If in the game we're talking about where the game had already gone over, so those people think, well, I've got my over, I should get paid. Well, what if it's the other way? What if the score is not over? Let's say it's under by 3 points. What do you want to do? You want to tell the over people they lost, and they still have 3 minutes to get those 3 points? And you're going to pay under people who can still lose? So it has to be fair for both sides. Most people see bets through the prism of their own bet. And you have to always think about a rule, is it going to be fair for both sides? And this is fair for both sides, and I think it's only new people. Yes, it is a rule, but it's fair for both sides, and it's evolved since 1976.
We've got about 10 minutes left. Let's go back out to any other questions. Yep, go ahead.
Roxy, I know we talk a lot about racing and NYCU.
Yes.
There's lost a lot of racetracks. Arlington Park, apologize.
Yeah.
Where do you see racing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
Businesses can die a slow death for a long time. People can make money out of declining businesses. They just don't fall off. Dog racing didn't end because it was inhumane to dogs. It ended because it wasn't economically viable. I know that's not the take that a lot of people like to hear, but basically that's why it ended. They would have taken care of the after-dog program if everybody was making money hand over fist.
Spoken like a true gambler, right?
Well, you know, the horse racing industry is doubling down on taking care of horses now after they finish. But if it's going to continue to be economically unviable in smaller places, and they'll have to close. But, you know, Chicago was a bit of a shocker. But the problem is it's a non-competitive game. The takeout's been non-competitive for a lot of, structure. It costs so much to put on the show. And I don't see a way from getting out of that, other than the fact that if I was betting single game parlays and was going up against 35 or 40%, I might give exactas a look in horse racing. So, it probably just lingers on. You get what you have right now. Everybody wants to go to the big days, and nobody wants to go on Wednesday afternoon. Yeah.
We have one in the back.
Yeah, Roxy, you talked about how surprised you were with the odds services and how quickly that business grew. So in the early days with LBSC on an autumn weekend, when you're hanging lines on everything from hockey to college football to NFL and probably NBA at that point, how chaotic was it to stay ahead of all that and actually be able to hang a reasonable number?
Yeah. Well, you only have to be as good as your competition, but eventually what happens is the players get smarter and then you have to adjust. It's very chaotic, but we had guys from outside the office that also contributed specialty odds, on hockey or college football, and we had guys looking at injuries and helping us. But it is chaotic, but the trading rooms do more now. They're using a lot more price discovery where they throw out stuff for small limits and find out what the price is. And, of course, eventually they were supposed to raise the limits, but they decided they liked the small limits so much they didn't. So, yeah, it was a hectic time. The schedule's much larger now. Computers helped a lot. I mean, especially in college basketball. Pretty hard to do, notebooks on 256 teams. And determine strength of schedules. So the computerization made the game easier for us, but the better players got better because of it.
Just had a couple of questions, enjoying everything so far. Going to what you just said, how would you narrow down like a big Saturday, these college football and basketball cards, narrowing them down a little bit? Would you specialize in a few conferences? That's the first part. The second part was kind of with half times in football. Anything specific you look for? Box score analysis, turnovers.
Yeah.
Looking for games that play different than, or games that should play different than they are.
The guys that I know that do good college football, they play the whole schedule. And rarely do you get a bet that could be twice as good as another bet. Now, you might get a number that's so good that you end up with more money on that one side because the numbers were good. Basically, people bet pretty close to a standard bet size. Following the conferences, I'm not so sure that's so good. I know it's because, first of all, you have to have ratings for all the teams they played outside the conference, right? So since most people are using computer models, I don't see why you might as well do one for everybody. Now, in the halftimes aren't that hard to make anymore because you've got these, in fact, they're not hard at all because you've got these in-game betting. And basically, when it ticks down to zero, that's what it is. And you know it has to be a good price unless somebody was down to the 3-yard line at the end of the game, at the end of the half, because the price has already taken action both ways. How to bet half-times, I don't know. I mean, it used to be easy, and when the scores, the over and unders were 33 and 34, you went under 17 and a half, and you took 3.5. But I can't help you with that one. Yeah.
Well, it's like in the NBA in the late 90s and early 2000s. The total's 196. They would just chop it in half, right? It took years to figure out that you got to build in the free throws and all that. That's how Bulgaris made his money, betting on second halves.
Yeah.
We got 5 minutes left.
We got one more here.
Yeah. So I'm curious, there's a lot of discussion out there, different books have different ways that maybe they're limiting players.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like variable limits on perceived like value of the customer, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious on your take on that. You have
Well, from a better standpoint, when I left the odds making business in 1999, I went back to betting. And between 2000 and 2003, I got thrown out of every book in Europe and England. It took them longer. You actually had to win. They just didn't toss you for beating a number back then. And most of them, they didn't insult you, though, by cutting your limit down to $3. They just said, hey, we can't beat you. Now, I had a couple of guys who were pretty nice about it. Ladbrokes took my credit line and put it into a betting exchange. They own BetDac. And then Victor Chandler let me bet a lot of money up until the end, even on horses. And they just sent me a letter that, you're too good for us, and if you were all our players, we couldn't win. And you're only betting U.S. sports, so we can't learn that much from you, or something like that. So now, what are they doing now? I originally thought that you'd have to make 10 bets before they could tell you whether you're smart better now, but they say that, some algorithms can point somebody out in 3 bets. Well, that's sort of scary. As a bettor, I've moved past all the U.S. books, actually, except for Nevada, because Nevada does post limits, and you can now. The apps are different. People started getting thrown out the first time there were phone accounts, or limited, not thrown out, or limited, right? So this is nothing new. But Nevada, you can actually go to the counter and make that bet, and you can ask them if they want to take more. These 2 guys are real good at it right here at South Point. Circa's good too. Maybe they don't want more, but they will take the limit. The phone app business is totally different. There's no personal relationship anymore, but you can't grow very well if you only have a personal relationship with all your bettors. So that was inevitable that it was going to turn into just a numbers game. And probably 90% of the bettors are getting what they want, and the other make a lot of noise. So I don't really know what the answer to it is, but I think there should be some limits. I mean, some minimum limits you'd have to abide by. I don't think that's wrong. I know they did it with Australian bookmakers. They all cried about it, but they did it. I think you should, if in an NFL game, you should have to be take at least $1,000. That's pretty low, but you should have to be, Now, if you have some convoluted prop and you only want to take 100 on it, that's fine. But to send people back that, no, we're accepting $3.77, that's just flat out insulting.
Best question for last. Who's got it?
Oh, Kenny.
Kenny
Hey.
White.
Looking good, Sammy, great job.
Thank you.
My question is, I've seen in soccer, European soccer,
Yeah.
that they do take in-regulation betting. So it doesn't cost you. Do you think you'll see that, or we will see that come in maybe college basketball, college football? Because I lose so many under bets in overtime. And underdogs. You got a dog that's live.
Yeah.
There's no T in college basketball, and then the favorite that now scores you 12-2.
You lose +9.
I'll tell you what's really brutal, Kenny, is baseball totals. Once they start going to the 10th inning, they can score more than a whole total.
Yeah, well, both teams start with a runner in second.
Yeah. Well, the reason they can do in regulation betting in soccer is the 3 results. So there's the the home team win, home team loss, and draw. And so they just do the 90 minutes plus stoppage. So if you want to bet for actually the result of the game, they have a different line. And I think that's the only reason they have that regulation bet ends, because there's 3 outcomes. Well, anybody could do it. Yeah, anybody could do it. Actually, this came up a long time ago at a gaming control board meeting. Do you remember that? And I
How
want
do
to
you
say,
know exactly what meeting he's talking about? I'm like, oh yeah, I remember it. I was there.
it was a big talking point. The bettors wanted to get paid after, or at least some of them did, want to get paid after. They didn't want overtime to count in the final result. And I never wanted to be on anybody's side, but I always was on the side of the operators. And I just decided the best thing to do, it's a market problem, doesn't need to be regulated. And if somebody wants to do it, they can set their book up that way. Nobody ever did it. Now, it might have been an edge for someone who have done that. They might have got some more business out of it. Yeah. That's been going on for a long time, Kenny, as you know.
Look, thank you so much for making time for us. Time is precious, right?
Okay.
If you'd like to tweet at us how handsome Roxy is or how awesome he is, we will accept those tweets, and we will see you at the bar at
Okay.
7 o'clock.